Welcome to the Vibes Lab, your front row seat to the science behind VIA, the Vibes AI agentic platform making everyday brain health accessible to all. Every episode is designed to reveal insights that will enhance your cognitive health and well-being. Follow us to grab your lab key and experience limitless intelligence.
Reading. That's, something most of us just do. But imagine if reading felt less like understanding words and more like trying to crack some kind of constantly shifting code.
That's the reality for millions with dyslexia, and we usually picture it as a visual thing, right? Letters jumbled, maybe backwards.
Exactly. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the core issue, the real key, isn't just about vision or even traditional teaching methods alone?
What if it's something, well, unexpected, like sound?
That's precisely the surprising angle we're digging into today. There's emerging research, and it's pointing towards specific sound frequencies, even things like binaural beats.
Right. The idea being that these could potentially help essentially rewire the dyslexic brain, creating new pathways for reading success. It sounds a bit sci-fi, but there's science behind it.
Okay, let's unpack that. So for this deep dive, we've gathered a whole stack of research papers, articles, all exploring this connection.
The link between how our brains handle sound, our brainwave patterns, and how certain sounds might actually be therapeutic for dyslexia.
Our mission here is to sift through all that, find the most important insights, and really understand what they're telling us and telling you.
Yeah, the goal is really to make sense of this, well, counterintuitive idea that sound and reading problems are deeply connected, and how specific frequencies are being explored as tools.
It definitely challenges the usual assumptions about dyslexia.
It really does.
And straight away, the sources shift the perspective. They argue dyslexia isn't just visual. Maybe it's fundamentally an auditory processing issue.
Yes, that's a huge reframing in the research. The core challenge they highlight isn't just seeing letters clearly, it's the brain's difficulty processing rapid acoustic changes.
Rapid acoustic changes,
Yeah.
like fast sounds in speech.
Exactly. Think about the quick shifts between sounds, like buh versus puh in bat and pat. Those tiny, super fast differences are called phonemes.
The basic building blocks of spoken language.
Right, and the research suggests the dyslexic brain often struggles to distinguish and process those phonemes quickly and accurately enough.
Okay, so if the brain has trouble with sounds, how does that mess up reading?
Well, think about what reading is. You're linking visual symbols of the letters on the page back to those sounds, those phonemes they represent.
I see.
So if your brain isn't getting a clear, fast signal about what sound a letter or group of letters should make, decoding the written word becomes incredibly hard.
Like trying to read music without being able to clearly hear the notes in your head.
That's a great analogy. That deficit in processing the sounds is really central to the reading difficulty.
So is this just a theory, or does the research actually show measurable differences in the brain?
Oh, absolutely. They've used brain imaging, like EEG, and found real measurable differences.
In how dyslexic brains process sound.
Yes, particularly how they process different frequency ranges, and maybe more importantly, differences in their neural oscillations.
Neural oscillations, that's brain waves, right?
Yeah.
The rhythm of the brain's electrical activity.
Exactly. The patterns are distinctly different compared to non-dyslexic brains, especially in the brain areas used for language.
Okay, so the brain's rhythm is different.
And that's the target. That's where this sound therapy idea comes in. The aim is to use specific sounds to kind of nudge or guide those brain rhythms towards patterns that are more helpful for reading.
So the sounds can actually influence the brain waves. This is where it gets really fascinating. Let's talk about binaural beats. People might have heard of them for focus or sleep, maybe.
Right. They pop up a lot in wellness contexts.
How do they actually work? And why are they relevant for dyslexia?
Okay, the mechanism itself is pretty cool. You need headphones for this. You play a slightly different pure tone frequency into each ear.
Okay, like what kind of difference?
Say 440 hertz in your left ear and maybe 446 hertz in your right.
Just 6 hertz difference.
Exactly. Now, your brain doesn't just hear two separate tones. It cleverly perceives a third frequency, a sort of phantom beat.
And that phantom beat is the difference. So 6 hertz in that example.
Precisely. Your brain calculates the difference and perceives that 6 hertz beat.
Okay, so the brain creates this beat. What happens then?
This leads to something called neural entrainment. It's a fascinating phenomenon where your brain's own electrical activity, its brain waves, start to synchronize with that external perceived beat.
Like tapping your foot to music. The brain's rhythm starts matching the sound's rhythm.
That's a good way to think about it. It's like the brain's internal orchestra starting to sync up with this new beat frequency.
And the potential power for dyslexia comes from choosing the right beat frequency to entrain to.
That's the core idea. Since research links specific brainwave patterns to auditory processing and reading skills, the thinking is use binaural beats tuned to those helpful frequencies.
So you can sort of guide the brain's activity towards patterns that make reading and language processing easier.
Exactly. You're trying to create a more optimal neural environment for learning those skills.
Okay, let's get specific then. Which frequency ranges does the research focus on? First up, delta waves. They're slow, right?
Yeah.
1 to 4 hertz, often linked to deep sleep.
That's right, the slowest brainwaves. But they're incredibly important, not just for sleep. They're fundamental for processing the basic rhythm of speech, recognizing syllables, the real bedrock of understanding language.
And the sources found something significant about delta in dyslexia.
Yeah, a key finding was that children with dyslexia often show significantly impaired delta entrainment. Their brains struggle to sync up with these really fundamental speech rhythms.
So that affects their ability to grasp the basic flow and structure of spoken words.
Precisely. It hits right at that foundational level of auditory processing.
So the idea behind using delta binaural beats is to directly target and try to strengthen that specific weakened ability.
Yes, exactly. The research suggests benefits like improving how they process syllables, enhancing their recognition of speech rhythm, which is key for reading fluency, and also supporting the kind of deep learning states needed for the brain to actually reorganize itself over time.
Strengthening the foundations.
Right. Building up that core auditory processing needed for reading.
The sources even mention a very specific combination, a 1.45 hertz delta beat using a 528 hertz carrier tone. Why that specific combo?
And just quickly, hertz means hertz, cycles per second, how fast the wave repeats.
That very low delta frequency, 1.45 hertz, seems aimed squarely at those deep, slow, fundamental processing pathways, the 528 hertz carrier tone. Well, that's sometimes called the miracle tone or love frequency.
From those ancient solfeggio scales.
Right. In this context, it seems to serve as a sort of harmonious, potentially calming background sound, perhaps making the brain more receptive to the delta beat, creating an optimal environment for that neural restructuring they talked about.
Okay, moving up the frequency scale a bit. Theta waves, typically 4 to 8 hertz. That's kind of the middle ground, like daydreaming, meditation.
Yeah, it's that zone between deep delta sleep and the more alert alpha state. It's an interesting one because sometimes excessive theta activity in certain brain areas is linked to attention difficulties.
Which often go hand in hand with dyslexia. Exactly. So it seems like a bit of a paradox, right? If too much theta can be an issue, how can theta beats be helpful?
Yeah, that sounds contradictory.
It does, and the sources call this the theta paradox. The key is that it's not about just boosting theta all over the place. It's about using specific, controlled theta frequencies.
To guide the brain towards a specific state.
Right. Guiding it towards a state that's focused but also relaxed. So while some therapies might aim to reduce excessive theta, these binaural beats use frequencies like, say, 6 hertz or 8 hertz therapeutically.
To achieve what specifically? Is there research on that?
Yes, there are examples. Studies show 6 hertz theta beats could influence the autonomic nervous system, that's your body's automatic stress control system. So it could help reduce the anxiety that often comes with learning challenges.
That makes sense. Lowering the stress around reading.
Another research found 8 hertz theta frequencies helped improve task completion efficiency quite significantly, actually, by 75% in one study with kids having attention issues.
Wow. So theta entrainment is about finding that sweet spot, calm, but alert and ready to learn.
Exactly. Creating that optimal state for taking in new information.
And that leads us nicely to alpha waves, around 10 hertz, often called the learning sweet spot.
Alpha really is considered that ideal bridge state. You're relaxed, calm, but fully alert and attentive. It's seen as the prime mental state for learning, processing info, and consolidating memories.
And it shows particular promise for learning disorders.
It seems so. One reason is that alpha frequencies tend to produce the fastest entrainment response. The brain often syncs up within just like 1 to 3 minutes.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, and research points to benefits like better attention, improved spatial learning. One study mentioned a 72% improvement when alpha was combined with visual stimulation. Generally, it seems to make people more receptive to learning interventions and better at picking up new skills.
Okay, so we have delta for the deep basics, theta for focus, calm, alpha for optimal learning readiness. But the sources didn't stop at binaural beats, right? They also looked at specific, pure frequencies.
Yes, listening to just a single tone, not two combined to make a beat. The first one mentioned was 528 hertz, which came up earlier as a carrier tone.
Right, the miracle tone.
Like,
What's its role in its own?
Well, the sources are careful to note that direct scientific proof linking just 528 hertz to dyslexia improvement is still developing, but it's often included because it's believed to create a harmonious, maybe calming, baseline state.
So, potentially supportive for a learner feeling stressed.
That seems to be the idea, creating a positive foundation, often used alongside other frequencies or therapies.
And then there was 432 hertz.
Right. This is another one based on tuning principles. Some believe 432 hertz tuning is more naturally resonant, maybe more aligned with nature or biology, compared to the standard 440 hertz tuning we usually hear in music.
And the proposed benefit.
Similar to 528 hertz, reports suggest it might foster a more relaxed receptive state, maybe touching on those theta or alpha qualities, potentially making someone more open to learning. But again, specific research isolating its direct effect on dyslexia is needed.
So those two sound more about creating a generally supportive backdrop. But there was one pure frequency that sounded incredibly specific, 30 hertz, called the phonological processor.
Yes, this was one of the most striking findings reported. This frequency, 30 hertz, which is in the low gamma range, showed remarkable specificity for phonological processing.
Which is that core skill, right? Hearing and working with the individual sounds and words, the very thing that's often difficult in dyslexia.
Exactly. And the research using 30 hertz auditory stimulation found that it led to selective improvements. Not just making people feel better overall, but specific gains in reading accuracy and other phonological skills.
Targeted effects.
Very targeted, aiming right at the core deficit.
And you mentioned these effects weren't just temporary.
That's another key point from the sources. The benefits observed from the 30 hertz stimulation apparently lasted for months after the treatment stopped.
Wow, suggesting it might actually be promoting lasting changes in those brain pathways.
That's the implication. Not just a quick boost, but potentially helping to retrain those fundamental phonological circuits.
Okay, so we've got binaural beats targeting different brainwave ranges, delta, theta, alpha, and then these pure tones, 528 hertz and 432 hertz for maybe general support, and this highly specific 30 hertz for phonological skills. How does someone actually use this stuff? What do the sources say about putting it into practice?
The practical guidelines seem pretty consistent across the research. First, and this is crucial, you must use good quality stereo headphones.
Makes sense, especially for binaural beats needing different sounds in each ear.
Absolutely. No headphones or using speakers just won't work for the binaural effect. Second, consistency is key.
Daily practice.
Yes, the recommendation is usually for consistent daily sessions, around 20 to 30 minutes long.
So not huge time commitment, but regular.
Exactly. And they also advise allowing a few minutes, maybe 1 to 3 at the start of each session, for the entrainment to actually kick in. Your brain needs a moment to sync up.
Give it time to tune in.
Right. And another interesting suggestion was to combine the sound sessions with actual reading practice.
Oh, like listen to the sounds while practicing reading.
Particularly when using alpha frequencies, because that's supposed to be the optimal state for learning and receptivity. So you might prime the brain with alpha beats, then do some reading exercises.
Okay, interesting synergy there. What about results? How long might it take to see changes?
The sources suggest a realistic time frame for seeing meaningful, noticeable improvements is typically around 6 to 10 weeks of that consistent daily practice.
Okay, so patience is needed.
Definitely. You might notice some smaller shifts or benefits sooner, maybe within 2 or 3 weeks. But for more lasting changes, it takes that regular commitment over a couple of months.
And the main message seems to be
regularity over intensity. Short, focused daily sessions are seen as much more effective for encouraging neural change than trying to do, long marathon sessions infrequently.
Now, a really important point the sources stressed was individual differences. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, right?
Not at all. They emphasize that responses can vary quite a bit. What works well for one person might not work the same way for another.
Why is that?
Well, factors like the specific type or severity of the dyslexia can play a role. Also, individual brain patterns differ. For instance, some people might show higher activity in other frequency bands, maybe like 40 hertz gamma.
Is that good or bad?
Not necessarily good or bad in itself, but it could be the brain trying to compensate for difficulties elsewhere. It's working harder or using different strategies. This really highlights why personalized approaches might be the future.
Understanding that unique brain signature. So if responses vary, how would you even know if it is helping someone? What are the positive signs to look for?
The sources list several indicators. Things like increased attention span during reading, maybe less frustration or resistance when it's time to read.
Okay.
Noticeable improvements in phonological awareness, that's a big one. Being better able to hear, identify, play with the sounds and words. Also, a general reduction in reading-related stress or anxiety.
And maybe skills sticking better between sessions.
Yes, better retention of what's being learned in reading instruction.
And monitoring progress. It's not like checking a score on a test every day. How should that be approached?
The advice is to track those specific underlying skills rather than expecting a sudden jump in reading level. Look for gradual improvements in things like recognizing individual phones, reading fluency, how smooth and connected the reading sounds, and understanding what's being read.
Focus on the building blocks.
Exactly. Remember, the idea is neural rewiring. And that takes time. But the sources are optimistic that with consistency, the changes can be really profound and lasting because you're potentially addressing the root neurological issue.
Okay, let's zoom out for the bigger picture. It seems really important to stress that none of this research presents sound therapy as a replacement for good reading instruction.
Absolutely critical point. The sources consistently frame it as an enhancement, a supportive tool.
As it enhances.
By helping to create those optimal brain states for learning and potentially tuning the actual neural pathways involved in processing sound, it can make the learner more receptive to and better able to benefit from traditional teaching methods like phonics.
So it's working on the brain's readiness and ability to learn, making the instruction more effective.
That's the idea. Addressing the neurological foundation, not just managing the surface symptoms.
It sounds like it's positioned as a potentially powerful, non-invasive tool, something relatively easy to integrate.
Yeah, that's a big part of the appeal mentioned. It's something that can often be done at home, just needing headphones and the right audio tracks. It can fit alongside existing support strategies.
And it definitely feels like it's pointing towards a more personalized future for interventions.
For sure. As we get better at understanding individual brain activity patterns, the potential to tailor specific sound protocols to a person's unique needs becomes really exciting.
When you look back at all this research we've covered, what's the thing that really stands out to you?
For me, it's still that initial, almost surprising idea that a challenge as complex as dyslexia, which we know involves deep neurological differences, might be significantly helped by something as seemingly simple, as non-invasive, as specific sound frequencies.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive at first glance.
Right. The potential for real lasting change through these relatively gentle auditory interventions is, I think, pretty compelling and hopeful.
It really is. So just to wrap up this deep dive, we've explored how looking at dyslexia through this auditory and neurological lens opens up some really fascinating possibilities.
Using specific sounds, targeting those foundational delta waves, finding balance with theta, getting into the alpha learning zone, even using super specific tones like 30 hertz for phonological processing.
All potential ways to support the brain's reading circuits.
Yeah, the research suggests sound therapy holds real potential to make the brain more receptive to learning and tackle some of those core auditory and brainwave differences linked to dyslexia.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given everything we've discussed, how targeted sounds might influence brainwaves, synchronize activity, maybe even help rewire pathways for something as fundamental as reading.
What other aspects of how our brains work, learning other things, focusing, maybe even managing emotions, might also be open to influence by specific, carefully designed sounds?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the brain's amazing flexibility, its plasticity.
And the subtle, yet potentially profound ways it connects with the world around us, including something as everyday as sound.
A truly fascinating deep dive. Thanks for joining us.